Yes, so thanks for joining this morning. So my name is Franck Vernerey. I'm a professor in mechanical. I'll try to run you over what we do in mechanics, in the mechanics area at CU. The nice thing about mechanics, I would say, is that it's a broad range of topics and things you can do, right? You can start from, fundamentals, applied math, physics, all the way to the design of materials and that are much more, I would say, industry related, right? So you have this broad range of application from fundamental to applications. Basically, if you think of mechanics, it's a really fundamental field. It started really long time ago with Galileo, and they were starting. Of course, you might know that they at the time we were trying to understand how materials would break and how you would make better materials and better structures. And now, of course, we have evolved all the way to the computer age, where we can use artificial intelligence, numerical simulations, and so on to really make designs of these materials like extremely precise and with increasingly complicated technologies. So just to give you a heads up of really why you would study mechanics of materials. So basically, we're talking about the branch of applied mechanics that really focuses on solids. Okay, so because we have another side of the program which is more on fluids. Here we would be much more on solids. So, and in solids we would be looking at development of stress, strain, deformation, and how they break, for instance. But there's a bit more than that, and I'll show you what different faculties do. And the reason to do that is you want to design safer structures. You can design structures and materials that are multifunctional. That means it's not just structural, but now they can have other functions. And you have applications in a broad range of engineering, right? And this is what Vera was saying. If you do mechanics, you can work on problems that are related to biomechanics, aerospace engineering. You can look at adhesives. I mean, any kind of application is always related to mechanics at some point. So how do we do this? I mean, I'll show you what faculties do, but most of the time our goal is to develop models that range from elasticity, plasticity, fracture mechanics, and the development of constitutive laws that tells you how different materials will behave. And at multiple scale, right? You can look at materials behaving from the micron scale all the way up to macroscopic, where we have the size of an airplane, for instance, right? And you can do, of course, to develop those models, you need to do experiments. So it's quite a big place for experimental research. All right, so what are the strength areas of our program? So I would say you can divide these strength areas into different kind of bins. The first one would be what type of materials are we looking at mostly here? We have a really big strength in soft materials, and you'll see that when I show you what we do. So soft materials, what they are is like polymers, hydrogels, also living tissues, anything that you would think as soft. And then another field is metamaterials and bio-inspired structures. These are materials that can kind of design the microstructure to make them more functional. And then intelligent materials. So actually living tissues go back in there, but you can have swarms, and you can have materials that are kind of reacting to their environment and doing some interesting things. So, and now in terms of, if I look at another bin, what are the scientific contributions we're doing? So you could do multi-scale modeling. So like I was saying, trying to understand how the effect of what's happening at one length scale affects the next one, and so on. And that can be done in terms of fracture and damage. You can look at friction, contact, and you can look at mechanics of growth. And then when I say growth is if you have biological materials that are growing and adapting, that's part of mechanics as well. Now, application, there are quite a few applications that you'll see. So I listed a few of them here that I'll let you read, but yeah, we'll go through them as we go through faculty. Okay, maybe I'll take a minute to see if you have any questions before I move to what specific faculties do. No questions? All right, so I'll move on then. So what I'll show you is I'll go through, we have like 8 main faculty in the mechanics area, but like Vera was saying, there is a lot of cross-disciplinary activities at CU. So you might, find someone who is in robotics and that are doing some mechanics, or someone who is in biomedical doing mechanics as well. So these 8 faculty are listed themselves as core mechanics, but you have also other faculty that will be involved in some mechanics. All right, so I'll start with a couple of faculties that are looking at functional and metamaterials. So let me define what this is. So a functional material is a material that has specific properties that are more than just structural, right? So it could be designed to be a sensor, an actuator, or a shock absorber, for instance. So this is much more than just holding your stress, but it has a function. And then a specific type of functional material are metamaterials. It's quite trendy these days. So there are materials that can be designed and they are quite unique in that you'll never find them in nature. They are really purely engineered materials. And they are used for waveguides and vibration damping, things like that. So in terms of faculty, we have Professor Chow, who is actually looking at smart devices and wearable electronics. So basically, you can imagine that you have like these smart band-aids that have embedded electronics in them, and they're able to sense your pulse and maybe even monitor your blood sugar and so on. And it will give you data to monitor your health. And so they are designing those materials that could be self-healing over time, because of course you want them to stay on you for a long time. So they have to self-heal and they have to be quite flexible and be able to always move with your body, right? So they have to be soft and quite smart. So this is, I would say, much more on the experimental applicable application side. So if you're interested in this, quite interesting research. Now we have Professor Vernerey, who is now looking more at the fundamentals of wave propagation and vibrations in different types of materials, waveguides, and this type of things. So they are, designing structures that would be at the micron or submicron scales in order for small waves to be guided through a material. And then you can use those little structures. Actually, they are metamaterials in this case because they are designed by humans. And you can design them exactly like you want in order for you to do some damping of sound, for instance, or guide some waves into doing something useful. So this is interesting in terms of maybe detecting damage as well, and you have applications in bio as well. As you can see, they're looking at the human skull guiding waves in there. All right, so now I'm going to move on to another area of mechanics, which is tissues and biomaterials. So let me tell you what a tissue is. So it's a group of cells. And so if you think of your tissue, there are cells that are embedded in an extracellular matrix. And those tissues are forming the organs within any organisms, right? So examples are muscle tissues, connective tissues, and others. And these tissues, of course, they are not just structural, but their role is to maintain your body structure and function. Now, a lot of research is done in biomaterials as well. So there are now biomaterial is different from a tissue because it's a material that you design yourself. Usually it's a soft material. It could be a polymer or gel, and it is designed to interact with the tissue, in order to make maybe the tissue grow, or you can do some drug delivery and so on. So we have a couple of faculties that are just focusing on these biomaterials and biological materials. The first one is Professor Kav, who is looking at the structure and mechanics of the extracellular matrix. Okay, so that's the tissue which is surrounding your cells. And so if you'll be looking at how that extracellular matrix evolves over time, especially when you have disease, and then you would find out how to maybe use drugs to change the dynamics of that extracellular matrix, and that could be used for regenerative therapies. Okay, so that's I would say more experimental and more on the bio side, if you had to. But there's a lot of mechanics. So Professor Ferguson is also doing similar things. So what she's doing is she's looking at the microstructure or the composition of tissues and looking at how these structures are evolving during aging and disease, and how mechanical loading is also affecting this evolution. So basically, you can see how mechanical loading now will be changing the structure of these tissues, and now how the structure will change the mechanical properties and the evolution of their mechanical behavior. So again, as you can see on these pictures, it's a lot of experimental devices that you can use to measure how tissues behave. It's good. All right, so now I'll move on to something maybe more fundamental here. Another field is the micromechanics of discrete materials. So micromechanics is a subfield of mechanics where you study the structure of this of the materials, but at the microscopic scale most of the time. So most of the materials are made of little I would say constituents. They could be grains, it could be fibers, it could be molecules, and how these constituents are put together and organized, they will influence the overall mechanical behavior of the material. So micromechanics is trying to understand how this relationship between structure and properties. Okay, so maybe the first faculty that I have here is Professor Bartola, and he's looking at the microarchitecture of, I would say, smart and programmable structural materials. So, for instance, one of his, I would say, key research topics is the mechanics of nacre that you see on the left here, where they looked at the biological material, which is the shell of the sea animals, and then they would look at the structure of them, which is made of platelets, and that are all glued by some biological adhesive. And they are looking at how the microstructural or the microarchitecture of these materials is affecting how they break. And once they understand the secret of nature, then they try to replicate it in a designed in a material that they can design themselves. So there's a lot of bio-inspiration here. And this group is doing some experiments and some modeling to be able to replicate these biological structures. Now we have Professor Bryant, who is looking now at granular materials. So now we are looking at the scale of grains. And you can imagine the number of structures made of this. So from snow to sand dunes to soil, right? And so they are looking at how the interaction between grains and the diversity, the polydiversity in grain size and so on, is going to be affecting the behavior of the full granular material. And it has applications to predicting avalanches and looking at the rheology, so the flow of granular flows, the flow of granular materials. And for instance, like she's been studying the formation of sand dunes and this type of thing. So you get the macroscopic behavior from understanding the microscopic interactions in the structure. Okay, so I'll move on to the final area, which is the mechanics of soft and active solids. So again, this is also, it's not just, I mean, it has applications to the biomaterials here, right? So it's not that a faculty doing this is only doing this. There's a lot of interaction between all of these fields. So a soft solid usually, I mean, it's defined as a gel. You know, if you think of hydrogels, would be like a jello, you know, like food materials, foams, rubber, and biological tissues. And so these materials are a little bit at the boundary between fluids and solids. So their characteristic is that they can undergo really large deformation and they can flow over a really long time scale as well. And so it kind of connects a little bit to the previous topic because it's these materials are made of little units, these molecules that are interacting together and they are responsible for the behavior of these materials. When you make those materials active, that means that now you think of the molecules consuming energy and starting to self-organize or start moving around in the material. So you can make those materials start moving around. So you get, you have examples in nature, right? I mean, any biological material like a muscle is not just supporting load, but it's also moving itself, right? So it's an actuator. And so here we are looking at how you can make those materials active. So first faculty is Professor Long, who is looking at the nonlinear behavior of these soft materials, mostly polymers. And he's really interested in how they deform, how they break. And in terms of how they break, you can break them in different ways, right? You can break them by just applying a large load to a material and it will break. Or you can apply sustained loading, like a small load for a long time, and eventually it will break by what is called fatigue. So they are looking at this type of thematics. Damage, of course, and they're also really interested in adhesion and friction. So you have some examples here on the slide. This group is doing mostly, I would say, theory, but with some experiments to feed the theory. Okay, the last one is myself. So, and what we do is also looking at soft material from the way they are made at the molecular level. And we are looking at how we can make those materials smart and active. So in a way, similar to Professor Barthola, we are kind of exploring how nature does it. So if we look at biological materials, they are able to, like a muscle, it can move. And we are trying to see how you can replicate these interesting active processes in synthetic matter. And so what we do is we mostly do modeling. So we use computer simulations and theory, but we work really close with experimental faculty. So we have we really have experimental systems to feed what we do. So we look at fracture of polymers, but also their active behavior and the mechanics of cells. All right, so now I'll finish. I think, I think in terms of time it's good. So I'll give you a few advices if you are thinking of applying to the program. One thing which is kind of useful is to gauge whether you're interested in more experimental work or more modeling work, because like I said, usually a group has one strength in one. Maybe they might be doing both, but there's always one strength in one of these, either computational or theoretical or experimental. So it's kind of good to know where you're going in, if once you join a group. Number two is, I think, like Vera said, you need to be prepared to do multidisciplinary research. So you would come maybe with a strong interest in mechanics, but you might have to learn a little bit of biology or learn a little bit of physics and so on, because that's what we do at CU, right? We work a lot with across boundaries. So that's also something that would guide your choice, because if you have interest in mechanics, but also in biology or also in robotics, then it might help you choose where you'd like to work. And one thing that would help you also in picking a group that you like is you can always go to the website of different faculty members and look at their papers, because that will tell you a lot about what you would do in an everyday, life, everyday basis in a group by looking at the papers. And finally, I'd like to conclude by saying that don't be shy, just contact faculty members. We are always happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, so just feel free to contact us, or even our graduate students. They'll be helpful. All right, so I think now we have time for questions and discussions.